present my preliminary study on urban inequality in Brazil. I'm examining the changes in perceptions of increasing equality in employment opportunities between two time periods, 96 and to 2003, the time of the unemployment crisis, which was the focus of my research starting in 96, and the time period of economic growth in Brazil since 2003. The perception of change is what will enable low-income women in São Paulo to grab the more available opportunities, although still limited, and change their living conditions. I question how are different generations of low-income women perceiving changes in economic growth and level of inequality, and whether there are opportunities for the younger generation that were not available to the older generation. Although I continue to focus on employment opportunities and conditions, as I explored issues of decreasing inequality, I realized during my fieldwork just a few weeks ago that along with employment opportunities and conditions, living conditions, education, and level of violence were crucial in determining their perception of whether there truly was a decline in inequality. I'll briefly focus more on the first two today. The first time period, 96 to 03, the focus of my forthcoming book, was, as you all know, a time of great paradox. São Paulo was a global city in the periphery that, on the one hand, had developed a complex financial and service sector and a highly technological manufacturing sector, but on the other hand, also had a growing sector of micro-enterprises, degradation of labor, considerable unemployment, and unprecedented levels of inequality. Although there continues to be a paradox in the period 01 to 12, inequality has declined in Brazil, reaching a 50-year low in Brazil and with a 0.56 Gini coefficient by 2011 in São Paulo. The change in inequality can be attributed to a combination of improvements such as in the labor market performance of low-skilled workers, education, and targeted government income programs. Yet, as many scholars, policymakers, and journalists worry, will this decrease in inequality be sustainable if other fundamentals such as equality of opportunity and access to productive assets such as healthcare and education are not adequately addressed? The current president, Dilma Rousseff, largely followed Lula's economic and social policies, including the welfare program, Bolsa Familia. In her swearing-in speech before Brazil's Congress, she said, quote, "We can be a more developed and fairer country." One of the reasons that Brazilian governments have focused more on equality is their significant economic growth, compared especially to others. Brazil was able to avoid real economic decline during this still ongoing global financial crisis, with a GDP growing by 7.5% in 2002. However, it only eked out 0.9% in 2012, the worst performance in 3 years. But the IMF still projects 3% growth this year, 4% in 2014, all leading to the growth in employment in São Paulo. For example, in the ABC region, female unemployment decreased from 24 in 03 to 11.9 in 012, and male unemployment decreased from 17.3 to 8.9, as seen in the graph. More workers are registered and paying into Social Security, allowing them to gain a pension and higher salaries. If we compare one of the worst years in the employment crisis, 98, and then to 2011, we see a 60 5.5% increase in the numbers of registered workers when there was an overall increase of 40.5% more workers. I wanted to point out, though, that even when one is registered, often one is not paid the correct salary because one's workers' cards is purposely the wrong position is put. While we examine income, there does seem to be still real inequities when we examine gender and race. While men earn on average 12.26 KIs per hour in the ABC region, in 2012, women earned on average 8.62. The racial and gender inequities have only slightly improved within the last 10 years, with, for example, black women's income compared to white men increasing from 40.6 to 42.9% of what white men earn. In terms of opportunities, 3 weeks ago when I asked the research participants in the 3 communities I've been studying since '96 and one in '98 in the municipalities of São Paulo and Diadema, whether there was more equality in São Paulo. Some laughed, telling me about the violence, but others said yes and mentioned 2 very different kinds of opportunities that they did not see themselves having before. Ability to consume more because of access to credit cards, and the other was educational opportunities. Coming from the United States, where our ability to consume has brought household debt and loss of homes, one questions, of course, this ability to consume more is a great advantage that will ultimately lead to more real equality. However, for the perception of equality, I realize that better ability to consume is extremely important. I asked one young woman in a comunidade in Diadema, "So everyone has a credit card now?" Renata responded, "Everyone in the world, everyone, including the most poor of the most poor of the most poor." She continued that even though these cards, that some low-income women have as many as 20, and that although they have abusive interest rates, they are real conveniences and allow one to buy goods even when one doesn't have the money, because one only gets paid on the 5th and the 20th day. Even door-to-door vendors and vendors in open-air markets use credit card machines for their transactions with their clients. At a Tupperware party in the comunidade, women were able to buy more, knowing that they could pay in 3 times. The number of educational programs and opportunities to study have surged. Particularly the younger generation of research participants were taking advantage of discounts at private universities if they had done well at the ENM, and programs such as Aprendiz, an apprenticeship program with organizations like Senac providing work experience and then often contacts to gain one's first job. Science Without Borders, paying and organizing students for a year to study science in other countries, and FIES, a program of the Ministry of Education to finance university education programs in faculdades associadas independentes do Grupo Educacional. For those students coming from households with incomes not more than 10 minimum salaries and wanting to teach in public schools, you only have to pay 50 reais every trimester while in school, but start paying 18 months later after you finish, 1% of your monthly salary for 100 months. A 46-year-old woman I knew was taking advantage of this program. She had been teaching in the literacy program, MOVA, but was moving out of the Diadema favela to another brand new favela in the interior of the state of São Paulo, and was going to continue the university program there and attempt to open up a public school in the new favela that had no services whatsoever yet. Other programs include free and low-cost technical courses being offered by the unions and Senai. The women I interviewed are studying or plan to study a whole range of different things, including biology, nursing, communications, journalism, nutrition, engineering, to be a work safety inspector, and law. The cost to the students varied considerably, from being free to being 2,000 to 3,000 reais a month, but most seemed to be paying around 300 to 400 reais a month. I both heard that it was easy to financially handle going to university, since one could also work, but as a result, they only slept a few hours a day. Many of them were receptionists, administrative assistants, healthcare workers, or worked at cash registers and as store vendors, making at most 700 reais a month. Most told me that less than 10% of their cohort was getting more than a high school education. However, during the first period, 96 to 03, none of my research participants were getting a university degree, and most women only had up to a fourth grade education. Yet, if for most jobs that one only needed that level of education before are requiring much higher levels of education today, what is happening to those who do not have a university education and to the older generation? They are not moving up in the firms, but there are still a lot of jobs in cleaning, serving as security guards, and the numbers of those jobs also have increased when the economy is good. I want to very quickly show you a few photographs of two of the three communities I've studied and images depicting the continued inequality in São Paulo. Images we all know too well, but we might often not get to see right next to one another. However, those who are living in those communities but are now going to university or working in the fancy shoppings see these contrasting images every day. It is these discrepancies that, of course, also guide the perceptions of the low-income women I interviewed. This is the new Faria Lima area being built like anything, the famous bridge. And right below all of this starts miles and miles, as you all know, of this kind of comunidade. This is one of the comunidades that has a favela in the center of it. And this is the comunidade in Diadema that I studied. Everybody building another layer, another level for their laundry. When I finally had the title to their land and house, Cida exclaimed, "No, and we will never have it, right, Simone? This here will always be invaded." She told me that in order for the titles to be given, the land would have to be assessed, mapped by an engineer, costing each family 7,000 reais. Quote, "For me, it is not worth it. Do you understand? She already pays 400 reais in taxes on her house and for water and electricity some more, but cannot use the property as collateral for a bank loan." Here's the favelinha that is part still of this former favela, and it's being destroyed now, and they'll move finally into apartment buildings, but this has taken 5 years. I wanted to take just a minute to talk about one of the families in the photo, Renata, who's at the Tupperware party here. I've known Cida since 1998 when she was my research assistant. Cida has financially struggled all her life to raise her children, mostly on her own after her husband was shot to death driving a taxi. She has held all sorts of low-paying jobs, including running a bar in front of her house, cleaning factories, and working on assembly lines and bringing home piecework, auto part springs to make a bit of extra money. Today, she's finally a registered worker, works as a cleaner in a bread factory, making and sadly calculated in front of me that she would have to work 20 more years to retire and be able to get a pension of the minimum wage. She's always rented out some of her rooms in her house. Her daughter lives in the other part of the house and contributes a lot to the household. Sita was originally working as a cleaner in a bread factory, but for an outsourced firm, earning only 500 reais, and finally feeling very exploited. And then the factory decided to pay the penalty for hiring her and another cleaner directly, and now she earns over double. The increase in salary has allowed Sita to buy things such as the 70 reais Tupperware bowl and pay 1,000 reais for repainting and plastering her living room and hallway walls. She's slowly building this other story that I was telling you about. Renata, Sita's daughter, started working in McDonald's, cleaning when she was 16 in 2009. She only lasted 6 months there, realizing that she was being terribly exploited and not even earning the minimum wage because they argued that she was doing an apprenticeship. Since then, she has worked in a few different jobs, losing her job in factories when they let the newest employees go when their business was slowing down. After being employed for 5 months but getting unemployment insurance because she had been registered, she worked on the municipal elections. Her next job paid 900, almost 3 times as much. For the past month, she's worked as a machine operator on the night shift for a multinational corporation, Thomas Gregg & Sons, making credit cards, and earns 1,400 reais. She got married at the age of 17, and her husband works during the day as a factory worker. They only see each other for a few hours in the morning. When I asked her whether it was hard to find jobs when one had lost one, she said, no, well, depending. Here in Brazil, they're asking for a lot of educational skills. Today, those who do not have high school, those who don't have special courses, those who do not have experience can't find employment. It is more difficult for women, she said. Renata plans on taking a technical course in work safety to be a work safety inspector. She says if she's then able to get a position, then she's going to go on to university. Renata exclaimed, it is that here it is changing for the generations. It has changed in the last 3 to 4 years. In the next 6 years, there'll be many more. It is because the labor market is much more demanding. Today, the parents can pay for university, and in 5 or 6 years, more will be able to pay. In my brother's times, her brother's just 7 years older, my mother could not pay. And I won't go into this woman's story, but she was a factory worker and now is working for the health clinic for the past 5 years, going door to door. So she's a healthcare worker making 3 times as much as she was before. And her daughter wants to study in the university, and she wants to become a soap opera actress. So I would like to end with a quote from this dreamer who wants to be a soap opera actress. And she said, and I'll do this in Portuguese, acho que tudo depende do brasileiro. Não adianta a gente falar que vai crescer, porque tudo depende da gente. Tudo começa através da gente. Se a gente vai atrás de uma coisa, lutar e conseguir, mas se a gente não quiser nada, eles quem vai fazer e vai depender deles, mas do jeito que eles querem. Então, acho que tudo depende do brasileiro. Não do jeito que eles querem, é do jeito que a gente quer. Porque nós somos cidadãos. Então, a gente tem que resolver o que queremos para o nosso futuro. Acho que é assim. Obrigada.